Dr. John Bruni's arrived. How are you, sir? Drinking his coffee.
Oh, I'm sorry, Jeremy. You got me almost mid-mouthful.
I didn't mean to catch you in the middle. You well?
Yes, thank you. Yes,
Good.
I am.
Thank you for coming.
No problem.
Appreciate it. Every president in the world seems to be beating a path to the door of China.
Yes, China is becoming the stabilizing influence in the international community. Surprise, surprise. All they had to do was never get in the way of Donald Trump making a mistake and they inherit the earth. It was a simple formula, but it is something that I think history shows is quite right. You never get in the way of someone making mistakes.
Now, does Xi Jinping, does he have the same welcoming parade and the same number of kids jumping up and down with flags? Do they all get the same treatment, I'm asking?
Well, I don't know. I mean, Donald Trump was allegedly led into a garden that Xi Jinping assured him no one else had access to, except for when Vladimir Putin came to visit him and went to the same garden. But you can play these games with Trump because he's a buffoon. I mean, in many ways, that is what he is.
He's got no idea.
He's got no idea, and you can lead him like a bull with a ring through its nose, to wherever you want it. And so long as you flatter him, you're okay.
Yeah,
that's it.
He's very much a sycophant. Sycophant, sorry,
yes.
that word, right?
So,
Definitely a sicko.
You can't say psycho.
He loves hanging around with the rich and famous.
And the powerful, and he sort of almost bathes in this collective glory. If you claim to be more powerful than Donald Trump, he won't say, "No, Gary, that's not true." He won't say that. He'll say, "Oh, can I stand next to you? Can I rub shoulders with the great man?"
He speaks very highly of you, John.
I know he does. Yes.
Yeah.
But it's kind of a sickening display of I don't know. I mean, everything. See, I can't even paint this pig with lipstick anymore because, for a long time now I've been trying to rationalize. Well, okay, maybe there are some intelligent people behind Trump doing all kinds of things to rectify the U.S. Republic. Maybe, but now. Oh, yeah, that's right. They've been purged out of the system. But now it's obvious that it's a corrupt, the United States now under Donald Trump is a corrupt apex banana republic. They are the very country that they used to castigate all those other countries south of the US border for being. They are now doing it better than they ever did it before because none of those South American states had the power, the wealth that they could shuffle around on the decks of their respective Titanics. So now we're seeing the United States in this situation, and look, honestly, I've been interviewing since I've come back from hospital. I've restarted up my podcast, and the people who I love and respect the most are those old style Republicans. Those never Trumpers, those real Reaganites.
Yeah.
And they are as disenfranchised from the system, the American system, political system, as I think I'm probably disenfranchised from my own political system, and it's both heartening and scary at the same time because they all say, John, as bad as things are here in the United States, never bet against America. Now, I've heard this on the last two podcasts, and I will say quite clearly from what my understanding is, the Republic of the old, the ones that, the America that we grew up under doesn't exist anymore. Now, there is no going back. The damage that Trump has done to relations internationally will mean decades worth of concentrated diplomacy to try to get things back. But, there is no animal in the history of history that has been able to do that. Once you break the shibboleth that kept everything going for as long as it has.
The shibboleth?
Well, the rule
great
of
wonderful
order,
word.
It's an old word, but it's a nice word to use.
It's a great word.
Yeah, it's a dramatic word. So, once you break those bonds with your allies will never see you in the same way again. Sell me out once, I will not trust you, is what they're doing. So, of course, Xi Jinping, who's sitting on the sidelines thinking, you know what? I'm going to do what I always do. I'm not going to be particularly offensive. I mean, I will repress my local Uyghurs and Tibetans and Hong Kongers and everyone else that thinks not good thoughts of me internally. But externally, I'm just going to sit there like the Buddha statue and just let the world come to me, and this is exactly what's happening.
And it's happened. Look, the Canadian Prime Minister, the German Chancellor, the French President, the English Prime Minister, Trump, Putin. I mean, it's a very well-worn path
but
to the great hall of the people.
Correct. But, again, when we talk about history, we tend to forget that the imperial Chinese dynasties that ruled over China for millennia operated along similar lines. There was that central power in Peking, Beijing, and there the allies weren't allies, they were tributary states. They all understood that China was the center of their world and their universe, so they all came, the kings from other places, and gave tribute to the Chinese emperor. We're starting to see a sort of similar pattern, and the Chinese don't have to do much. Now, you don't see that, and this is one thing that is really quite astounding. We look at China as Westerners as though we understand China, and we don't. We don't really understand the language, we don't understand nuance, and we don't understand that the Chinese are playing a default Chinese historical setting card. So they sit back and they build up their military forces, but they're not throwing their weight around like, I don't know, the United States is, right? So the US is all the power. I got all the power. So we're going to start bombing, and we're going to use it. We're going to, do all this. I'll blockade the blockade. I'll teach you a lesson. You upstart Iranians,
John,
Panamanians, and whatever else.
With some experience in going to China, I've been there about 30 times. I've got to know Chinese reasonably well.
Yep.
And a consistent thing that comes across to me is that they are all supporters of the writings of the Sun Tzu.
Yep.
And
I'm glad you said
furthermore,
it.
there's a more recent book that is worth reading by everyone called Thick Face, Black Heart. Have you heard of that book?
No.
It is an absolute stunner in terms of understanding how Xi Jinping is a classic example of the Po face.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And he maintains that Po face at all times and always puts on the same show.
Yes, he does.
And just recently, because of the way that we've seen Trump dance over there and cuddle up to him, and then a week later, Putin gets the same treatment, I think is how the Chinese are saying to Trump, rack off, buddy.
Look, she said something that I thought was very important. And some of the journos picked up on it, and some of the commentators did as well. And that is that she said, mentioned the Thucydides trap to the American president. Now, for those of you in the audience who don't know what the Thucydides trap is, it is an old historical phrase that harks back to the Peloponnesian War between the Greeks and the Spartans, where the Greeks and the Spartans, what am I saying? The Athenians and the Spartans, where the Athenians held the whip hand and thought that they could dominate the Peloponnesian Peninsula in Greece, in ancient Greece, until they came across the Spartans, and the Spartans were the rising power. And they, in the end of a very long and bitter feud, they belted the Athenians to the point where the Athenians were no longer the power on the Peloponnesian Peninsula. Yeah. So it's a theory of rising powers challenging established powers. Now, in the modern context, Xi Jinping is reminding the United States that yes, you are the established power, but we are the rising power. So be very careful with how you treat us.
I like the way they brought up their kids. They had the survival of the fittest, and if you weren't fit, you weren't going to survive. So they would put the child or the baby on the hill and leave it there for a day or a week or something. And if it was still alive when they went back, they thought, well, this kid's got some chutzpah. Yeah. They mightn't have used that expression. But
John, another important thing that people miss is the 100 years of shame that the Chinese talk about all the time. Yes. And, of course, the Lap and Belt Project is a reincarnation of how they controlled the world at one point in time. Yep. And that's not something that's talked about very much at all, or even understood.
No, it's not understood,
the whole
Gary.
Silk Road thing.
Yeah, it's not understood. No. And this is the thing. I had a Singaporean diplomat who was the president of the UN Security Council, Kishore Mahbubani. We spoke about this at quite some length. Now, he would be your quintessential Asianist, and I wouldn't take everything that he says on board, but I integrate at least 80% of what he says, and especially when we were talking about Australia's role in this region. Now, I know back in the day when Prime Minister Keating was trying to drive a particular viewpoint home, Keating came from a political philosophy of crash or crash through. There were a lot of things in Keating's program that theoretically would have been beneficial for Australia, but he didn't really care to let Australians organically, bring it into their thinking. He just smacked it in there and said, you either accept it or you can go and get stuffed. Well, he suffered the political consequences for that action. But some of the things like his outreach to regional countries, the more focused effort at trying to understand Indonesia, Malaysia, Singapore, China, Japan, those are things now we do not do, because when the opposition then took over, they, and look, I was a Howard guy back in the day, so there's no running away from that. But, when Howard did take over, all of a sudden these Asia language programs, all the things that would help young Australians understand Asia were torched, because they were no longer considered relevant. So what we did then was we went back to our simple-minded view of the world, where it's all about the Americans and the Asians are a threat or an enemy, or, failed states and a collection of things that we need to stay away from. That's a problem for us.
It is a problem. People wonder why the Chinese are so sensitive about the South China Sea. Yeah. Of course, that's integral in the Lappin Belt project.
Well, it is. And the other thing too, there are ways in which we could have run a counter program to what the Chinese are doing, but without really understanding Chinese power, understanding Chinese culture, political culture in particular, because we just don't know. I mean, pick someone out in Canberra, in the policy and the political sense, who would really have an understanding of China and how Australia should navigate its way through. So we've got this bet each way thing. It's like we're playing international two-up. We're flipping the coin. Today it's China, tomorrow it's the United States. Today it's the United States, tomorrow it's China. This is unsustainable.
We'd be very wise to pick up our game with respect China. Having been there, as I said earlier, so many times, I think they're absolutely delightful people. And I've done business with them. I've stayed in their homes. I've eaten with them. Well, I've made love to a couple too.
They
are delightful people.
They own 70% of the property in Australia.
Well, yes, indeed they do.
And guess who? And again, I don't want to raise this, but being the avowed political cynic, who made that happen? The Chinese didn't come in here with guns a-blazing. We said, we like your money. Come here, take whatever you like. And we've created the laws and regulations necessary for that kind of international investment, and then we complain about it. And yet the ironic issue that I hate to use it because it goes against everything that I think is good and fair in the Australia that I understand, and that is, we look at the Chinese, and we like to pick bones with them here, there, and everywhere else. And yet, if it wasn't for our economic relations with China, we would have had, I don't know how many recessions over the last 25 years, but at least 3 or 4 of them we dodged. Yeah. And arguably, we kind of survived COVID, not because of the ruckus that Morrison caused to the Chinese government, but all that goodwill that we had with the Chinese prior to COVID, that allowed us to do things with our economy, which didn't hit us as hard as other countries. So,
well, what do we do? What do we do with Taiwan, though?
Exactly,
it's sort of sitting there.
Yep.
Well, I know they're patient.
It's a bit like Hong Kong, really. At the end of the day, it's Chinese territory.
But they play the long game. But sooner or later, America and Australia are going to have to decide how they will react.
Well, see, the thing is, we've all and this is another own goal by the West. You want to be an enemy of China, then be an enemy. But we want it both ways. We want to milk them for the cash cow that they are, and we want to bludgeon them over their head every time we think they step out of line. That only gets you so far. So long as the Chinese are under you in a power sense, that you think that you can get away with, monstering the Chinese, or the Chinese don't want to really raise a storm because they get something out of you. So long as those sort of relationships are stable, it's fine. But when China starts accruing power and is now starting to challenge the United States internationally, not by war, not by intervention, not by anything, but by bags of money and the promise of international stability, guess where the rest of the world is going to start looking at? They're not looking at the United States right now, let me tell you.
Why bomb it if you can buy it?
It's a far better way of doing business.
Well, historically,
right?
John, I stand corrected, but when was the last time China invaded someone?
1979, and it was
Hong
against.
Kong.
Well, I didn't invade.
No,
them.
that wasn't.
Tibet.
That was a no. Well, yeah,
Tibet's
that was
theirs
1950. That was 51 or 55. But 1979 was technically the last time China invaded a neighboring state, which was Vietnam, and it got its hide whipped because, of course, the People's Liberation Army back then was, literally a 1950 army designed for people's mobilization warfare, not for modern war. And the Vietnamese had just come out of the Vietnam War and whipped the Americans. So, of course, they just turned their military forces around and whipped the Chinese. Now, I don't think that you can say now that the Chinese are in a similar position, but we don't know. See, they live by this thing called strategic ambiguity, not the strategic ambiguity of Trump. I'm going to bomb them. I'm not going to bomb them. It's Taco Tuesday.
They're smarter than that.
They're smart. So what they do is they say, I'm going to build up my military forces. I'm not going to release any information about my military forces, so you won't know whether they're good, bad, indifferent, whether they're well trained or not. But they're going to be so big that you're going to have to start thinking, well, gee, do I really want to tackle these guys? Because what happens if their stuff is good? What happens if their soldiers are well trained? We're going to take casualties. We may not want to take those sort of casualties. That's where Chinese power is. It's all mental. Yeah. And I would argue that were it to ever come to a shooting war over a place like Taiwan, it will be very reminiscent to what we're seeing between Russia and Ukraine at the moment. Right now, the Ukrainians are the one holding the whip hand. Why? Because even though the Americans have technically stepped back from arming Ukraine, because, America first and all that rubbish, the Europeans have stepped up their game and have started filling the holes that the Americans have left
no
for them.
Choice, really.
No, they haven't, and that's not a bad thing.
No,
but I can see that if there was going to be a shooting war over Taiwan, the Americans, like the Americans happen to be doing over the last since the end of World War II, they underestimate their opponent. They think their opponent is weak or somehow technically inferior or somehow they don't know what they're doing, only they know because their intelligence services are the top of the tops. And yet, really, when you think about it and take the long historical view, name me one war in the last 80 years that they've clearly won. I can name two. I can name two, right? So there was Grenada and there was Panama, right? And both in the 1980s and both against powers that are so small, technically incompetent, corrupt, failed states that, yes, of course the United States is going to send a small force in there and take out Noriega or take out the Cuban revolutionaries that hold up in Grenada. Yeah. But when was it that the United States actually took on a major power that was at their level?
Is he going to take Cuba?
It's highly likely. Who knows? One minute it's on, next minute it's off. Look at what's happening in the Strait of Hormuz. And the thing that got me this morning, and it's something that I spoke about earlier on this program a number of times, but I think we're getting now close to the red line. And the red line is supply and demand. Now, up until this point in time, we've managed to squeak by the Strait of Hormuz oil and fossil fuel related stuff.
It's going to run out. Yeah.
Because we've been dipping into our reserves. But those reserves are finite. And the good money is by about June, July, the northern summer, the peak of the northern summer where most people like to get out and about and do their things, we're going to start seeing that those reserves are going to be diminishing even faster. And if Trump keeps on tacoing out with no answer to the Strait of Hormuz, we are in serious crisis. We're talking about fuel prices we can't even imagine. We're talking about an inflationary wave that will hit us all simultaneously. Normally when we have recessions and depressions, they hit parts of the world.
Yeah.
This one is going to hit everyone. The advanced developed economies, the global south, everybody. There is not going to be one person walking away from this.
This is not the time to introduce a budget like that they've just introduced. The great Dr. John Bruni is my guest from Sage International, and of course the
Focus podcast.
The Focus podcast,
indeed.
That interesting story about the Australian. He's a former U.S. fighter pilot. He's now an Australian, as I say. He's been in jail for 4 years without a trial. The Americans want to extradite him because apparently when he left the Air Force, it must have been a fairly senior rank that he had, when he left the Air Force, instead of, settling down in the United States, he got a job in China, training fighter pilots. And the Americans he's a traitor. They say he's a traitor. We're going to extradite him. And I don't know if the Australians are going to allow it to happen. But what do you make of that? I mean, he was a free agent, wasn't he?
Well, let me put it to you this way. We've had Australian nationals caught up in similar crises over the last few years where, we have an open market for ex-service personnel. So we're talking about people who have left either the American military or the Australian military. Now, those who are in specialist occupations, for instance, they deal with the technology, fighter pilots or people who work behind the scenes in the air crews and so on and so forth. These are the people who then, after they have been let go by their respective state, are effectively unemployed if they cannot find a path to employment post their service career. So in an open free market, the very market that we're always, beating the drum saying how wonderful it is, in a free market, you should, by rights, go to whoever's holding the paper bag with the money in there and sell your skills on. Now, there are a couple of things with regard to that. Yes, there is the idea that you're selling your own country out, but then there's the other notion as well.
But they're not at war with China.
We're not at war with China. We're trading with China. They're our number one trading partner. So if you look at it from that perspective, firstly, what is the problem? That's not treason. That's the market. Right? So we don't use them anymore. We don't put them in a reserve and pay them a stipend to keep their skills in our country, which would be the correct thing to do because they do have stuff that can still help Australia or America moving forward. So we let them go, and then we say it's a free market, do what you like. As soon as they do what they like, we say, you're a traitor, how dare you, we're going to jail you.
Because you've got certain skills as a fighter pilot. It's sort of narrow. You've got to look for somebody who wants those skills. Now, Tony, with his factory, made various things for the Defence Force, and you had to sign a secrets agreement, part of that, which, do you have to stay stumm for the rest of your life?
Well, I didn't actually, when I was with British Aerospace, I didn't actually work on any particularly top secret things, but I think, you definitely would have to.
Yeah.
If you've got those sort of clearances.
Do they have the death penalty in the United States, John?
Some states they do.
Some states they do. It's not across the board. Yeah.
Well, I think that
sadly not in Florida.
Well, we've got.
What do you mean, Gary? What do you mean?
I've got your name.
Yeah. We've got an agreement, I believe, that we do not extradite people to any country that has the death penalty.
That's correct. Yes.
And clearly, if he's facing a charge of treason. You would think
that would probably open that door, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I would think.
Look, Guantanamo's filling up.
Oh my God, Guantanamo Bay, that brings back memories. Not that I've been there, but no, but there was a certain young Australian
you were wearing the other day was a bit odd.
Yeah, there was a certain young Australian that got himself caught up in the so-called Taliban. At the time that we decided to invade, and his name was. I can say his name?
Yes.
All right, David Hicks.
Yes.
And at that time I was working with Senator the Honourable Natasha Stott-Despoy's office, and we then launched a major campaign to get this guy released because we thought that, firstly, the charges that the Australian government were laying against him were not correct, and we thought that it would be far better for him to be released from Guantanamo Bay and face Australian justice and an Australian investigation if that were the case. Look, if he's done something wrong, let the Australian courts deal with it. And I think that that's kind of made me rather one-eyed in terms of how I see this sort of thing, except for when it comes to people who have a genocidal view on the world. Now, a young man travelling around doing weird things, maybe he wasn't quite, thinking correctly in terms of where he saw himself in the world. That's one thing.
Girls go and join the Taliban, don't they?
But the girls going to join the Taliban. Oh no, not even the Taliban, but ISIS brides and all that kind of stuff.
Mistake.
These people have a genocidal view of the West. they bear the children of hardcore fighters. That's a different level of commitment, I think, than just, some aimless...
I think I was being cynical.
Wanderer. Yeah,
yes.
no, I get it, Gary. But, I think for people out there, it's important to know that the law is full of minefields. But what you need to do is you need to have a very clear sense of what is right and what is wrong, what you can manage and what you can't manage. Now, you can manage a person like David Hicks. That's easy. He served his time, he did his penance, and now he's out there in the community doing whatever he's doing. We don't know, and that's a good thing. On the other hand, the ISIS brides coming back in with their kids from an extremely radicalized political and social environment, their ability to reintegrate in this community, I think, is very low. And I think that you are then going to set yourself up for problems down the road at some point.
I agree.
This is Caroline's just given me this. In short, a group of Australian women and children have left a camp in northeastern Syria and are believed to be on their way back to Australia. It follows the arrival of 4 women and 9 children back in Australia early this month. 3 of these women in that earlier cohort were arrested and charged by federal police. Now, do you really buy the fact that the federal government here is trying to pretend that passports were somehow provided and delivered, and
we know nothing?
And we know nothing. Will the Australian people buy that? It's a hot issue.
Look, it is a hot issue. I don't think Australian people are going to buy it, and I think that this is where political capital from, political parties like One Nation will make its greatest hits against the current government. And that's not to say that, we should all go out there and vote for Pauline Hanson. There are going to be those that they think that that's fantastic. There are others that need to be, who would say, well, okay, that's fine, but what is the long-standing policy that she brings to the table here? And there needs to be a long-standing policy. We need to have a judiciary that can work in Australia's favour. It's a similar kind of claim where we say the police do their job pretty good. They keep the streets as free from crime as they possibly can. But then, when they catch the bad guy, it's usually the legal system that lets them back out in the street. So we need to have some form of understanding that, the people who are the long arm of the law to keep things, public safety front and foremost, should also be the people who are in the courts of law. Because if there's a disconnect between the two, you can nab whoever you want off the street or, bring the ISIS brides over, and all of a sudden they're out in the community and, either themselves, their kids, or maybe their husbands, they'll come out as well and they'll cause all merry hell here too. So there has to be some logic and common sense to it. And at the moment, we're all away with, the system is all away with the fairies. There is no solid construct here.
Can you stay for a while?
I can stay for a little bit, yep.
Okay, the great John Bruni, ladies and gentlemen, Dr. John from Sage International and the Focus podcasts. I'll run through the menu and tell you who's coming up on the program. Former Premier Dean Brown will be with us at about 10:30. Stay for that. Here come the Pips.
You're listening to the Court of Public Opinion with Jeremy Cordeaux, where the time is 10 a.m. Australian Central Standard Time.
Hey! What's the weather for the weekend gonna be? Will it be hot, cold, rain, snow?
And the weather today in Adelaide, it will be a partly cloudy day.
You may not find us on your TV, because in case you did not know, we're being brought to you